Another week has come to an end and we get to see how our favorite movies are doing financially. On this show, we break down the domestic weekend performers, how big the films are playing on a global scale, and what blockbusters become successful, and which ones fall flat on their faces. We have a lot to talk about, so let's tear this thing open and see what's cooking. Debuting in first place is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny with an underwhelming $60 million. Coming in below last week's projections of $68 to $95 million, a very poor result for this film, and we'll get further into what kind of financial trouble this film is in at the end of this show. In second place is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse with $11.5 million, dropping only 39% from last week. In third place in its third weekend is Elemental with another $11.3 million, dropping only 39% as well. Good holds for these two movies. In fourth place in its second weekend, dropping 50%, is No Hard Feelings, bringing in another $7.5 million. And rounding out the top 5 once again, holding pretty well in its fourth weekend, is Transformers Rise of the Beasts, dropping 40% with another $7 million. Keep in mind, this film is playing in almost 1,000 theaters less than all the other movies on this list, so it's actually playing pretty competitively later in its run. Now let's move on to check on how some of these bigger blockbusters are doing at the worldwide box office. Just so you know, I only qualify films that have blockbuster level budgets for these next two categories of the report. In its first weekend, Indiana Jones has grossed a total of $130 million worldwide. After 18 days, The Flash has grossed $244.31 million. Also, after 18 days, Elemental has grossed $186.78 million. After 25 days, Transformers Rise of the Beasts has grossed $379.06 million. After a whole month in release, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse has grossed an impressive $607.27 million. 39 days out, and The Little Mermaid has brought in $523.80 million. And for the last time on this show, having passed its 45-day threshold, Fast X has managed to gross $707.31 million. In the last 45 days, these movies have grossed a total of $2.778 billion in global box office tickets. Here's how some of these newer movies are competing in the worldwide top 10. Number 1, of course, is still the Super Mario Bros. Movie. In number 2 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. In third place is Fast X. In fourth place is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. In fifth place is The Little Mermaid. In sixth place is somehow Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. To be honest, I'm surprised that movie made more than $20. In seventh place, John Wick Chapter 4. In eighth place is Transformers Rise of the Beasts. In ninth place is Creed 3. And rounding out the top 10 is The Flash. Moving on to our profitability calculator, I have done a bunch of research and created a formula for estimating the profit margin for blockbuster films. Movie studios don't get all the revenue back. In fact, they only get about 2/3 of the domestic take, and across the rest of the world, the take is only around 45%. How we calculate profitability is we combine the production budget with the advertising costs. Advertising is hard to find numbers on, so if nothing is reported, it's usually half of the production budget, but not greater than $100 million. We then compare the total spend with the studio take. The sum of this determines the ROI, which is return on investment. First off is Fast X, which had an absurd budget thanks to massive production issues, inflating its budget to $340 million and reportedly costing around $100 million to market. That's an insane $440 million spend. So far, the film has grossed $707.31 million worldwide. Domestically, the film has grossed $145.48 million, so the actual take is $96.02 million from that market. Internationally, the film has grossed $561.83 million, bringing the take down to $252.82 million. After distribution share, that brings our global take to $348.84 million, and against a $440 million spend, the return on investment is negative $91.15 million for Universal Studios. After spending 45 days in the market, Fast X will not be able to break even in its theatrical window, so it is definitively a box office bomb. Things aren't looking too good for The Little Mermaid either. After costing a combined $400 million for the studio, the return on investment so far is negative $105.28 million for Disney Studios. For Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, however, Sony only spent $150 million. So far, the film has made a positive return on investment of $194.65 million. Transformers Rise of the Beast reportedly spent around $293 million. So far, the return on investment is negative $93.84 million for Paramount Pictures. Elemental cost Pixar around $300 million after advertising and production. So far, the return on investment is negative $197.31 million. The Flash isn't doing too well either, costing around $330 million after production and advertising. So far, the return on investment is negative $199.21 million for Warner Brothers. Now for the new kid on the block, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. The film had a reported budget of $295 million and a marketing budget of $100 million. That brings the total spend to an astronomical $395 million. So far, the film has grossed $130 million worldwide, $60 million from the domestic markets, bringing the takedown to $39.60 million, and only $70 from the international markets, bringing the takedown to $31.5 million. The total take is somewhere around $71.10 million, and off of a $395 million spend, that means the return on investment is negative $323.90 million. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, this is disastrous. I can't emphasize how bad of a situation this is for Lucasfilm and Disney Studios. Unless the film holds exceptionally well, it will be one of the biggest bombs in cinematic history. Next weekend, we have the release of a new entry in the horror franchise, Insidious: The Red Door, tracking for a $20 to $20 million opening, and the R-rated comedy Joyride, tracking for an $8 to $15 million opening. This is quite the summer, and there will be so much more to talk about in next week's box office report. Thanks for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and sticking around. I do movie reviews and box office reports every single week, so if you don't want to miss that, you know what to do.